number one spot.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Seth Joyner Show. My, do I have a show for you. But man, what a great weekend of football. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going into Green Bay and taking down the Green Bay Packers. Wow, who saw that coming? The way that the Green Bay Packers were trending, the way that they were playing to end the season, and the way that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were up and down, no one seemed that coming at all. And then the Kansas City Chiefs doing what the Kansas City Chiefs have been doing for the last 3 years. They just completely dismantled the Buffalo Bills. And you've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers facing off against the Kansas City Chiefs in their second consecutive Super Bowl. We'll get to that game and those teams a little bit later. But right now, the most pressing information is what's going on with our Philadelphia Eagles. We got a new head coach, we got a new offensive coordinator, and we got a new defensive coordinator. But to help me break all of that down, my good friend Josh Ennis of the Josh Ennis Show joins me today, and my colleague from NBC Sports Philly, Barrett Brooks. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing today?
I'm cool, man. I'm just watching everything flow here in Philadelphia. Makes it easy, man, to do shows, bro.
Well, and I'm down here in Houston, so you guys think you have drama. I mean, we got a ton of drama here as well, too. I mean, it's a battle of maybe two of the worst situations in football right now. I mean, the most drama you're going to find. Usually Philly's the drama because the drama is what sells there. We're not used to drama down here, but it's super drama here right now.
Yeah. Well, listen, the Eagles have made a decision. Jeffrey Lurie, I don't know if you guys heard the call that Jeffrey put out there to inform Nick Sirianni that he was going to be the new head coach, but I found it, pretty hilarious and a bit ridiculous for an NFL owner. But Nick Sirianni, 39 years old, former OC for the Indianapolis Colts, is now the Philadelphia Eagles head man. Shane Steichen, 35 years old, former offensive coordinator for the LA Chargers, just 1 year in that role. And Jonathan Gannon, 37 years old. He was the defensive back coach for the Colts this past year. Starting with you, Barrett, give me your take on all three of these gentlemen. What you think?
Well, at this point, I'm confused. Considering the fact that you just ran away a Super Bowl winning coach, after 3 years winning the Super Bowl, you let him go. Yes, you had a bad record, but it doesn't change the fact that, this guy still had a little bit of cachet with him being a Super Bowl winning coach. Those are few and far between. And then you let him go for the simple fact that he wanted to have his own coaching staff. He wanted to make and have that autonomy to pick his own players and coaching staff. And yet you let this young guy come in and Nick Sirianni pick his whole staff. I'm kind of confused in that aspect. You let somebody go for the same thing that you're letting these young guys do. And usually when you pick coordinators and you have a young first-year head coach, you usually put somebody around him at the coordinator position that has a little cachet as far as being an older guy, a more established guy, a guy that's done it before, especially on the defensive side of the ball where, he's going to have the autonomy really to run things by himself and alone as opposed to, Schwartz, he was by himself doing his thing. He was like the head coach of the defense. But yet you look at what's going on the offensive side of the ball. You got an offensive coordinator that, I don't know if he called plays. I don't know if he, helped Hayward. I've seen so many situations where, they're saying that he wasn't the guy really that got Hayward going in the right direction with the Chargers. So this is like, I'm still trying to choose, and I'm really anxious to see what's going to go on as far as establishing a culture in that locker room, especially what's going on as far as, the pandemic and everything else. There's so many questions I have to ask, but let me let Josh get back on this now.
You guys know more about coaches than I do and more about what these coaches do than I do because you've been around it more and that, but I can tell you this, that I don't understand how you have a guy that wins a Super Bowl, and I know they made the playoffs a couple of times, and those were kind of fluky playoffs because the division stinks, but I don't understand how you go from a Super Bowl winning coach to blowing the whole thing up And to me, it all comes back to this. It comes back to two people. It comes back to Howie, and it comes back to Jeffrey Lurie. And I was telling you guys this before we started. I think that what you've got here is Andy Reid make Jeffrey Lurie look really competent for about 14 years. And now when you're on your third head coach since you fired Reid, so that's 2012. So the first year of Chip was 2013. So since 2013, you are now on your third head coach. And the one guy that's still there is your general manager, even though you demoted him, but you couldn't get rid of him during Howie. You demoted him. You put him in a little back room somewhere and said, don't worry, Chip's going to slip up at some point and you're going to be right back in charge. And sure enough, he was right back in charge. So I can't tell you if Sirianni is going to be a good coach, but I can tell you that Doug Peterson was a good coach. I believe he was a good coach. I think he was saddled with a terrible roster for the most part, a lot of bad contracts, a lot of broken down older dudes, Jason Peters, for example, the locker room snitch to the media, Alshon Jeffrey. The drafts have been abysmal, yet somehow this guy got him to the playoffs 3 years that he was there and won a Super Bowl while he was there with a backup quarterback while he was there. So I can't tell you how good these other guys are going to be, but you let a Super Bowl winning coach leave during this when the city died for a Super Bowl for 50 years, and now it's 3 years later, you build him bad rosters and you run him out of town. To me, that's disastrous to do that. And by the way, Doug's going to get a really good job at some point. Obviously not this year, but there'll be 8 jobs open next year. And sure enough, he'll get one of them, and he will succeed far more than I believe Sirianni will succeed in Philadelphia.
Well, listen, there are some things, that we need to take into, consideration. I asked the same exact question. Why? Why make this move? I feel like Doug Peterson was at the point in his career where, he wanted some control. And when he really had, the Eagles by the cojones, that was the time right after Super Bowl 52 in 2017. That was the time to assert himself then. And he didn't do that. And now he got to a point where, okay, now I want control over my coaches, so on and so forth. I need some more control over my players. And Howie just wasn't having it. For me, this whole thing boils down to Howie and the controllables. When Doug Peterson first came in, he was controllable. Doug Peterson moved to a point now where he's no longer controllable. Now they had to move on. So now you've got a guy, a staff, a 37, a 39, and a 35-year-old that's running this ship that Howie can control. Then you got to consider how they begin to think, how these young guys can now relate to a young NFL and things of that nature. You also got to take into consideration, you listen to Jeffrey Lurie in his press conference post the firing of Doug Peterson, that, hey, we are in a transition period. We are, basically, without saying that, they're in a rebuild situation. And how do you put Doug Peterson in a situation where he's been under the fire this year? If he goes into next year and he's thinking short term to midterm and they don't get it done, that the city, the fans, the media are going to be calling for his head on a platter. So in a lot of ways, it might have been a good thing for Doug to move on. So I get you guys' point, but, you got young coaches that are going to be coaching a young movement that also allows Howie, the master manipulator, to continue to stay in power and control all the controllables. Josh.
It's very Machiavellian the way you explain that about power, but it's true. It's about who's got the power, and there's a lot of backstabbing and infighting, and I imagine it happens in a lot of places. But in particular in Philadelphia, everything's magnified, right? I'm in Houston. The media is not as pervasive. Maybe that's where they don't dig deep on this kind of stuff. They're not looking for drama. In Philadelphia, the media is looking to destroy you, and the media is looking for drama. And so the Eagles certainly give you that, but it's very Machiavellian the way, and Howie Roseman gives off that vibe because, again, who's been there the whole time, right? And I'm not saying he's not done good things. I mean, at the time, the trade up for Carson Wentz was a great move to get to number 2. And I don't know that Carson Wentz is cooked. I don't know that he's done yet, but they've done a good job in some instances, but it's very, very dark, very kind of backstabby, very kind of, I guess I question how much control Jeffrey Lurie actually has over his franchise. And I used to just assume he was a great owner. People would call the radio stations in Philly and say, oh, he's terrible, Jeffrey Lurie. I'd say, well, I don't know, man. Outside of maybe Bob Kraft, maybe the Hunts, maybe a couple other owners in the league, like he's a pretty stable owner. He's had the same coach for a decade and a half. But as I said earlier, man, you look at what he's doing now and how it's almost like his little GM is running the entire organization and calling all of the shots. And you're starting to see how poorly run this organization actually seems to be at this point. And they could be on their way to, in another 3 years, looking for a head coach. Then in another 3. And at that point, you're not a stable organization. You're the Jets. You're your teams like that are constantly looking for a new coach, and there's turnover every 3 years. And good organizations don't do that. So I don't think it's unfair to say right now that the Eagles are not a well-run organization, and that doesn't bode well for people moving forward.
At this point, you talk about an organization right now that, they talk about the gold standard, the new way of doing things. And I don't see it right now because the decisions that are making are just like you said, a power moves of one guy wanting to control more than he should be controlling. He wants to be called a football guy. I don't care about a football guy. I just want to win. Now, I was under the impression that they brought in head coach Nick Sirianni to mold Carson into the quarterback that he needs to be. When at the end of the day, Carson is the only person that could change who Carson is. I can remember, Seth, you saying back in fact, it was week 4. You said you now have a quarterback, not controversy, but you said a quarterback
problem.
That's right, a quarterback problem. And at the core of the problem, yes, the talent evaluation hasn't been there, and a guy in Carson was put in a situation where he had too much too fast. He was able to dictate what goes on in an organization too much, and when you don't have the proper guys coming in to grow with him, and you're bringing in veteran players instead of bringing in guys to grow with them, and through the draft and developing this talent, it's going to be this way. So number one, they didn't draft well, so they didn't have young guys around him to go forward into the future. Number two, he had too much too early. So now Carson is in a position where he wants to dictate what he wants to do. And Howie is, he's tried to put people around him to help him out, but they just haven't panned out. So I think that, this is, at this point, this organization went about things in the wrong way. Now, as far as, the the head coach and the 2 coordinators being puppets, they might be. But, Doug was just tired of going down with the ship. He didn't want to go down with the ship, so he jumped ship.
And, listen, there's nothing wrong with that. As a Super Bowl winning coach at some point, like I said earlier, you have to assume, some semblance of control over your staff and your players. The 900-pound gorilla in the room right now is Carson Wentz. Absolutely. It's obvious to me that, this move has been made, to fix him. But when you got a first-time head coach that's never been a head coach before, and you got an offensive coordinator that only has one full year play calling abilities in his pocket. How do they fix Carson? I mean, what is it that fixes Carson? I mean, this could wind up being, when you go this young as a organization, and you've seen Press Taylor be a young quarterback coach to Carson Wentz last year. A guy that's welded so much power over the first 4 or 5 years of his career, that could be problematic. But to Barrett's point, how do you fix him? Is fixing him just as simple as, getting rid of Jalen Hurts and having him feel comfortable that Nate Sudfeld is still, his backup and there's really no threat there? How do they coexist? And
how much of it's mental? Let me ask you this. How much of it is mental with him and how much is it ability? Because you brought up Hurts. So obviously the second they draft Hurts in the second round, that's obviously a mind bleep to Wentz. Like Wentz didn't handle that well. And you could argue a good general manager would not have done that move because they clearly had holes.
But hold up. But why? But
right.
Because I don't think that Winston's shown any signs that he's not good. Now, he had moments where he hadn't been great, right? And I get you guys are competitors and you say bring in guys to compete. But if you've got a guy that you've got $100 million invested in, wouldn't you try to do anything you could with that particular pick to find more players to make life better for that player? I'm not feeling sorry for him. I'm not feeling sorry for him for the pick, but find him a player that can make him better and make the team better in that moment.
All you have to do is go back and look at the previous 2 drafts. They've been offensive-centric drafts.
They didn't do well in those drafts, though, either.
No, but listen, they signed a wide receiver in the offseason. They traded for a wide receiver in the offseason, I should say. They drafted 3 of them. They drafted 3 offensive linemen this year, okay? You go back to last year, they drafted a wide receiver in the second round. They've tried. They've given him the resources. Now, when he signed on the dotted line for a $128 million extension, okay, to me, that moves you from a position of feeling any type of way about what they do, understanding the commitment that they've made, the financial commitment. There's not a single player on the team that's going to make more money than you, okay? So the whole mind thing that went on with Carson, if that's what it is, it just doesn't fly with me, because as a competitor, okay, look what they did with Aaron Rodgers. They drafted Jordan Love last year, and what did Aaron do? He just turned around and became the league's MVP.
But he's also a Hall of Fame guy that's established. But I would argue that it's been proven that the organization backs Aaron Rodgers extremely. I mean, they don't like a coach that he's got. I mean, I know it took a while, but they got rid of Mike McCarthy eventually. Point being that he's a Hall of Famer, and he's clearly one of the top 5 guys of the last 20 years, maybe top 3 guys of the last 20 years. Obviously, that's not Wentz. Maybe he can get there, maybe he can't. But the point in that is, I'm not saying don't bring in people to compete, but when you've got an established piece, you got a guy in his 20s. Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers did the exact same thing to Brett Favre. When Brett Favre looked old, they said, all right, we're going to draft Aaron Rodgers. It's an age thing more than anything, right, with Aaron Rodgers. And then Rodgers, of course, is like the ultimate competitor and goes out and balls out this year. That's not Wentz. Wentz is in his early 20s, mid-20s, I guess I should say. He's in his mid-20s. It's a messed up situation there. You would agree that there was a ton of infighting that made it into the media a couple years ago because they had a mole in the locker room that's talking all sorts of trash about Wentz and Foles and everything else. So it was already a messy situation. Sometimes it helps as an organization to not make the situation muddier. And I think they made that situation muddier. Did they need to draft Jalen Hurts? Is that a must pick? Was that like wow, we can't pass up Jalen Hurts? And I don't think that was the case. And then if you look at what they've done in all those offensive drafts you brought up, which one of these offensive players they've drafted are any good? Like the skill guys stink.
That's the problem right there. You don't have anybody right now who can stand out and be the offensive juggernaut that this team needs to go into the future. Carson was that guy, but he's so messed up fundamentally and mentally that you could have bought me with a wood nickel when Seth said we have a quarterback problem. I'm like, no, there's no way we can have a quarterback problem when we have a $128 million guy, a guy that, won 13 games going into, the year they won the Super Bowl. Was a major part of that was an MVP conversation. He willed the last 4 games before this last season to get into the playoffs. He got hurt at the end of the season. So they were saying, he gets hurt all the time. Well, he didn't get hurt until the playoff game. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this is his next big step up. This is where he's going to turn the corner and be a productive top 5, top 10 quarterback in the league. And what does he do? He goes the exact opposite. I thought he won his team over with everything happened, with the Black Lives Matter, him taking a vocal stance. That meant nothing because he regressed instead of progressing. So he is the reason I would say that this team hasn't been able to compete this year because he chose to, and we talk about all the time in his post conferences, I'm going to continue to play the way I'm playing. I'm going to continue to force the ball. I'm going to continue to make bad decisions. And that's exactly what he did and didn't give this organization an opportunity to win.
Well, listen, Bernie Grant says, Hurts was an insurance policy. Now, listen, that I have to agree with that because, you take the cumulative effect of, 3 injuries and 3 successive years, along with his inconsistencies last year leading up to the end of the year. And then you couple that with the aha moment of how bad he played this year, then, really you can say that the move to draft Jalen was a great move when you stop and think about it.
Do you think that Hurts would have been taken in the second round by anybody else?
No.
Yeah.
That's where I would think the argument is. I think you could have gotten him later, and maybe you still could have gotten him and somebody in the second round that would have been someone that would help Wentz. Like, I get when you take a quarterback in the second round, that's telling your quarterback, like, we kind of think you suck, dude. And I get your point. Like, it's bleep or get off the pot at that point. Like, you got to show what you got. But you take a quarterback in the second round, you're telling your quarterback, like, we think you suck. Or at least we're worried about you. And you could say it's health, but like they think for other reasons other than health that they had concerns about him. So
listen,
I think they could have gotten Hurts in the third round, and it might not have been such a big deal. And then it became a media drama like Philadelphia does. It became oh my God, they hate Wentz. And this season never had a chance to succeed with all of that going against it. Plus, he played he was awful this year. So there's a bunch of factors in that.
Well, listen, they had every right in the world to be concerned. You know, you as a football player, it's your job to go out and play football, not to worry about who's drafted or who they're bringing in behind you. The ultimate competitor in me, you know, especially and maybe my tilt is a little bit different, you know, because I was drafted in the eighth round. You know, for years, teams that I played on drafted my heir apparent, and I'm like, you know what, bring them on. Bring the competition on.
But do you think it's different for a quarterback than a linebacker, though? Or any position?
Why?
Well, I'm just asking. I don't know. I've never been in there before, so I'm asking you because that's a guy that makes $120 million. All eyes are on him.
You're obviously.
Well, and that's the thing, though. Like, I mean, you are a dominant defensive player, but you're also not Randall Cunningham in that situation, right? Like, all eyes are going to be on Randall Cunningham and everything Randall Cunningham does in that era. So, like, I think there's a different pressure maybe that goes with being the quarterback because the quarterback doesn't get taken in and out. The linebacker can take a play or something off. They take him out for a few plays, bring him back in for a package. Quarterback don't work that way. Like, I'm asking you as a fan, does it work that way, or do you sympathize or at least look at a quarterback differently and go, look, all eyes are on him. He ain't coming out of the game. So do you look at that differently as a linebacker or an offensive lineman in that case?
No, not particularly for me, you know, and I'll let Barrett answer, you know, for the offensive line position. For me, not necessarily because, you know, I wasn't a guy who ever came off the field anyway. I played first, second, third, and fourth down. So it didn't matter. My thing is, you know, when you're talking about competition, the NFL is all about competition. Okay. And I think one of the gravest mistakes that organizations make, you know, because they draft a quarterback, you know, in the top 5, top 10, is that they give them everything on a silver platter. You know, the only way that they fail is that they mess up, okay? And they never have to compete for their job where every other position has to compete. What is wrong with competing, okay? If you're going to give him the most money on the roster and you're going to say that he's the most important guy on your team, shouldn't he be the most mentally strong guy that you have on your roster then?
I agree, but do you... But whenever you were playing, do you feel, and I don't remember any of this stuff, so you tell me, that when you were playing, somebody was specifically drafted with the idea that that person was going to take your spot and you were in a battle with that person?
Well, I'll answer that in a second, but consider this, okay? They just paid him $128 million. They're on the hook for 68 of it guaranteed, okay? So that's commitment enough. Now, absolutely. There's been times where guys have been drafted for competition purposes because
do you remember any of them in particular?
Nah, not really. I do.
Who was it?
But if that doesn't light a competitive fire under you, you know, then maybe you're doing the wrong thing. Maybe you're in the wrong, you know, business. You know, because it's always what you do in practice is about competition. What you do in the game is about competition. Everything is about competition. So why are you so moved because they drafted a guy at your position? You know,
well, he's probably mentally fragile. I don't doubt that. I think we've seen that Wentz is totally a mental midget in that case. So, like, I get that part of it. No, that's certain. But if you know he's a mental midget and you know you've invested this money in him, then I could argue it's on you to go, all right, let's coddle this guy. Let's not bring in somebody to compete with him for his job.
We're sorry. No,
well, and I'm not telling you it's right. I'm not telling you it's right, but you're the ones that invested the money in him, and you know him better than anybody if you're the coach and the GM. So if you're in that spot, I would argue it should be your job to make sure you eliminate those types of distractions that might hurt him because he's your $120 million quarterback. I don't disagree. Like Tom Brady had the battle with Garoppolo. He hated Garoppolo. Garoppolo was a second-round pick, and all Brady did was said, well, he ain't taking my job, but he's Tom Brady, who had been to 8 Super Bowls. Carson Wentz, 4 years, he's 4 years in the league. There's a different mindset, you know. The Saints never drafted someone to be Drew Brees' heir apparent when he was taking them to Super Bowls, right? Like, but you don't do that. If they're drafting the heir apparent, to me, when they drafted a guy in the second round, they're telling you they don't believe in you. And we can all argue you should be tougher mentally than that. You're not wrong. We're all kind of from a different era. But like, it's the reality that they're telling you they don't think you're good enough. And some people will react far worse to that. Some people will bootstraps and let's go. And some will wilt. And maybe he wilted in that. And that's a detriment to him. But yeah,
it's all about how you perceive the move that's been made and how you deal with it. Go ahead, Barry.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I was a second-round pick. I was actually Jeffrey Lurie's first offensive lineman taken, the third player he drafted. I was drafted in the second round. And every year that I was there, they brought somebody to take my position. I came in and I started left tackle. They brought in Jermaine Mayberry. After Jermaine Mayberry, that next year they drafted him in the first round. They turned right back around and bring in Steve Wallace my third year. And Richard Cooper my third year. And then it wasn't until that fourth year where Big Trey came in and locked it down. Big Trey was like, hey, this is my position from this point on. And I had to move over to the right side, and compete at that position. Then I realized, Trey will be the next tackle for the next 10 years at left tackle. But that's comes with, the competitive nature of being in NFL. That's why NFL stands for not for long. Now, I think that they gave Carson too much too early and sired him the next coming. And he took it literally, and he stopped. He stopped with the competitive nature as far as, how he approached the game. Everything was given to him. He got coaches fired from that organization. A guy like Frank Reich, who said it, we understand he's a little, pig-headed or he wants to do things a certain way. No, you have to coach a guy out of that. You can't allow him to be that type of guy because he couldn't fix himself. That was very apparent. So you have to have somebody in there who's not his best friend like Press Taylor was and get him back, fundamentally pointed in the right direction. And if they don't do that now and get him pointed fundamentally in the right direction, they'll have another headache on their hands going into the season because he will play at the same level he was playing at unless he gets fixed. And then they'll have Jalen Hurts in there and they'll just spend $34 million out, and nobody's going to want to trade for him because now it's 2 years of bad football and he won't be worth a donut hole as far as being a quarterback in this league.
Okay, so how do you fix him?
He's got to get back fundamentally. He has to make that. You're right, but he has to make the conscious decision of being a better player. He can no longer be not held accountable for his actions on the field. He's not held accountable for that. You could tell he wasn't because the way his conversation was, after the game. In fact, Seth, tell him how he would say what he would say after the game. Josh, it was crazy. I was dumbfounded every time I hear him after the game. It was 12 weeks of saying the same thing. We need to play better. I'm gonna continue to be who I am. But we know we did wrong. Come on, stop with the we. Take responsibility of what you put out there on the field. That was your product on the field. They didn't give up a 5-second sack because they weren't blocking. It's 5 seconds. You have time to throw it. Throw the damn ball, throw it out of bounds, or do whatever. Don't take the sack. He just was so entrenched with being a big play quarterback like the other guys that he forgot how to play small ball, get the ball out, keep the chains moving, keep the other guys' offense off the field. That's what football is about. And he didn't take those little things that improves you and makes you a better player.
Did Andy Reid, and obviously quarterbacks are treated differently, but did Andy coddle Donovan? What was that relationship like? No. I don't know. I wasn't there. So, because again, I know that quarterbacks are treated differently by coaches no matter what. I think it's Jimmy Johnson that said if Troy Aikman or Emmitt Smith falls asleep in a meeting, I'll say wake up. If the third string offensive lineman falls asleep, you're cut. You're treated differently. But how was that relationship? When you saw those two guys?
Well, I was there in Philadelphia during that time, for a little bit of that time period. And, it was one of those things where there was expectations. You had to play to a certain level. Because if you look at it, he also had quarterbacks come in and try to take a position. In fact, he went out and got Michael Vick during the time that McNabb was there.
But that was that was also the end of McNabb too.
Then we'll go to Cobb. He drafted Cobb high.
He did second round, right?
He wanted to make sure that things were uncomfortable as a player in that organization, and that uncomfortableness will take you to another level if you allow it to. But you can also fall underneath yourself and not be a player by just not wanting to compete. Like, you did me wrong, so I'm gonna be mad. I'm gonna go on my. No, you can't do that. You got to go out there and play, man.
Oh, I respect the hell out of that. Like, I'm buddies with ND Kalu. You guys know ND.
ND's my guy. I played with him for years.
Yeah, I know. ND's one of my best buddies. I used to work with him here in Houston, and he's awesome. Like, I believe he was a 5th round pick. Yeah. And, like, basically he survived in the league for, 11 years, 12 years. And you go, as a 5th round pick, you have to have a certain edge about you, right? Because you're up against it already as a 5th round pick. And when you see, like, a Javon Curse or somebody come in, you're like, well, I mean, obviously they don't think too highly of me. They're going after this guy, but you got to keep hustling to survive. And I think ND's got like 60 career sacks, had a solid NFL career. And I do think there's a different mental makeup for guys who are drafted. Like you said, Seth, you were drafted in the 8th round. That round doesn't even exist anymore. You were drafted in a round that is so low, it no longer exists. But like that creates that kind of chip on your shoulder. You also played for a coach in Buddy Ryan, who was a walking chip on your shoulder. Like, that's who he was. That was his character, was everyone's against us. We're the big bad guys that are going to come in. We hate quarterbacks. We had that whole shtick that was kind of, and maybe that's who he honestly was, but it was a character that was there. And I think you were built with that. And I think in 2021 NFL, notice all the guys you're talking about who are so mentally tough. They didn't get drafted 2 years ago. Aaron Rodgers is like 37 years old. Drew Brees is 42. Tom Brady's 42. The younger guys are the ones you start to hear more about. And maybe that's just a product of the generation, of the Twitter generation, of the immediate gratification generation. I think there's a lot of truth to that, because you didn't see Twitch or you didn't see ESPN when you were playing, Seth. I mean, that was there, but it's not like you could go to social media instantly. Well, ESPN was there, not Twitch, but like ESPN was there. But like, it's not like you could run off to social media and 100,000 people are messaging going, hey, hell of a play, Seth. You didn't know what people thought of you unless they booed you in the stadium or not. That's all you knew. So like, I think there is something to say about young players, and I'm not trying to forgive them for it, but they're in an era where there's so much negativity or positivity coming their way instantly. And I think that does alter the mind of a lot of younger people. They're also from a more coddled generation, a more active parent generation, a helicopter parent generation to some degree, that a lot of people, like I'm 34, but when I grew up, my dad was out doing whatever the hell my dad was doing. There were nights he'd leave me at the community center. He'd forget to pick me up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know that guys experience that as much anymore. And then they're all kind of concerned about what's going on Twitch and on social media and their brand. And I think guys might get a little less mentally tough than guys who didn't have to see all that stuff. It was a lot easier to zone out stuff when it wasn't there. I mean, you turn on the 10 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news in Philly, there's a highlight. ESPN, there's a highlight. Howard Eskin's yelling about how poorly you played and how you're a dope, but that's it. You didn't have some Joe Blow 215 Billy in a Twitch telling you that, you know, you're a loser and that you're a horrible player and go back to wherever you came from. You didn't see that unless you heard it in the stadium from some dummy. So I do think the mental makeup is not as strong, but I also, to a degree, understand it because it is a different universe. Aaron Rodgers doesn't care what you say on Twitter. Dude's been in the league since 05, before there was Facebook and MySpace were in 05. He didn't experience that. Drew Brees doesn't care what you say on Twitter, but I think younger guys do. And I think mentally that takes a toll on you if you can't handle it. And I think we're going to get, as we go on and on in football, there are going to be more guys who can't handle that.
They got to learn how to put a headband on, fold them rabbit ears back. So listen, I want to keep moving here. With all this youth, assuming, some of the reports, about the Eagles and where they're headed and what they're doing. When I think about this head coach, this offensive coordinator, this DC, how much control are these guys going to have? Barrett, you touched on it, at the beginning, talking about how, they're giving him the option to, bring in the coaches that he wants. But, the puppet master Howie is still right there. He's controlling every facet of the roster, from draft picks to free agent signings. And, from what we learned this year, even game day roster moves and who's to play and who's not to play, man.
Wasn't that crazy that we figured out that Howie was dictating if a player was going to be up or not? I mean, I wouldn't have had a coach. You know, Ray Rhodes would have went nuts if anybody said anything. You know, what's his name? Who was my guy when I was there? Oh my goodness, he's your boy. You guys go back and forth on Twitter all the time.
Oh, Joe Banner.
GM. Yeah, Joe Banner. Joe Banner was my guy. He would have went nuts if he'd have heard Joe Banner say, "All right, you need to dress him and not him." Oh, it'd have been a fight. I mean, Ray Rhodes would have fought Joe Banner in the hallway. So it's different. It's different the way things are now. But looking at how they're bringing in these young guys and they're giving Nick Sirianni the autonomy to pick who he wants as a coordinator. That's mind blowing to me because that's why Doug left. Doug had a little bit of cachet. He had just won a Super Bowl, but they're allowing these guys to come in. Now we're talking about a defensive coordinator that has never been a defensive coordinator in his life. And he's going to have on his shoulders, a city in which, you know how it is in Philly. And you know how defensive-centric Philadelphia is. They still want the same defense you played in out there, and we know that's not possible because they don't have the athletes to do it. But, they want success early in Philadelphia. And that's where it's been. You look at Ray Rhodes, his first 2 years. We had some success. We went to the playoffs 2 years in a row. You look with Big Red. After the second year, he had won double-digit games. Even with Chip Kelly, when they brought him in, his first 2 years, he won double-digit games the first 2 years. So they're going to want instant success. How can they get these young guys to really build a culture when they're not going to be able to be in the locker room with each other? I mean, this is going to be the same situation it was last year. They're not going to have the autonomy to be able to sit back and be around each other in these meeting rooms. It's going to be on Zoom. How are they going to really feel what this coaching staff is about? It's going to be tough, man. And when you're allowing Howie to dictate those type of circumstances, I mean, I don't know how much success you could have, in that locker room with that coaching staff. I mean, even with the offensive coordinator, who's going to call the plays? I haven't heard yet who's going to call the plays. I mean, is it going to be Nick? This is something we still have to work out. I mean, does he know the same system that Nick Sirianni does as offensive coordinator? Those are all things that have to be worked out. And there's a lot's going to go on. And the fact that we don't know if it's still going to be here or not, we should not be thinking about that right now. I still think that Carson is the best quarterback in that locker room. So we'll see. I mean, it's up in the air with me.
Josh, Barrett alluded to, the defense and what everybody expects. For 5 years, we had to endure Jim Schwartz and his bend but don't break style of defense. Yeah. Now, when you look at Jonathan Gannon, and you look at that Colts defense, was pretty darn good. So I guess
but look at the guys that were wearing the uniforms on that Colts defense versus the junk that's over here.
There's a lot to be said about, the talent that you have and, the system that you put into, I still contend that even though Jim Schwartz's style was bend but don't break, it was the wrong type of style for the Philadelphia market,
Yep.
So yep. What are we going to look like? Are we going to be bend but don't break? Are we going to be, more aggressive? Again,
it don't matter if you don't get players. You're gonna break. I mean, they don't have them. Like, I can ask you this because you play defense. If you're a lesser talented team, like let's say you don't have elite corners, and I think we'd all agree that outside of their defensive front, I mean, basically everybody out there could be thrown away. I mean, there aren't too many guys on that defense that are spectacular, right? I mean,
but besides Slay.
Slay is good. Slay is good. Okay, yeah. So Slay and Fletcher Cox and Graham. Right? Like, you look at some of those guys, you're like, everybody else could go. You can say you don't need them. So if you have a lesser talented defense, and I have no reason to believe they're going to replace 8 okay players with 8 great players, wouldn't you argue that to make up for your lack of talent, you have to be aggressive? That's the only option you have is, as Tank always says, pressure bust pipes, right? So you have to bring pressure on these guys to make up for the fact that they're not uber talented in a lot of these spots. You play defense, Seth. Is that a fair thing to say? It's kind of like play press defense in basketball. Always be pressing, if you lack guys that can beat you in the half court, just press them all day and try to outwork them and have more energy and force turnovers. Is it similar in football when you lack talent on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, I think the defensive coordinators today, I mean, listen, their mentalities are different. Their mentality is more along the lines of, okay, you know, we can give up first downs and we can give them as much real estate as they want from 20 to 20, you know, but then we got to be able to try to figure out, you know, how to stop them once they get to the red zone. And what happens with most of these teams that play a bend but don't break style, once they get in the red zone, then they begin to bring pressure, okay? So it's just, it all depends on the mentality of the coaches and their comfort level, you know, with the players on the back end. Listen, you can only blitz when you have confidence in the guys on the outside to be able to hold up, and the guys that are on slots and guys that are on tight ends and guys that are on backs out of the backfield. You know, I'm always more bent towards bringing pressure than I am playing soft, because I believe playing soft makes your defense soft. Bringing more pressure makes you more aggressive as a player. It makes you a more aggressive tackler. It makes you a more aggressive blitzer. It makes you a more aggressive man coverage guy at the line of scrimmage. Instead of backing up, you realize that ball's got to come out, so you better get up and fight at the line of scrimmage. Now, listen, I realize that the Eagles are lack talent and lack overall, you know, great players. But, you know, I've compiled a list of guys right here, man, that, you know, from the Colts to the Chargers that could potentially be available to the Eagles and be an upgrade. Okay, you got Xavier Rhodes. You know, yes. He was basically run out of Minnesota, went to Indianapolis.
And brought him over.
Gannon. Yeah, he brought him over. You know, he kind of, you know, remade him. He had a heck of a year this year. You got TJ Carey, another Colt cornerback. You got Trey Burton, with the uncertainty of, you know, what's probably going to happen with Zach Ertz in the offseason.
Yep.
You got Zach Pascal, another wide receiver that could give you depth. You know, at the end of the day, he's restricted. The Eagles might have to give us some draft picks to be able to get him, but he's a guy that's there. You got Marlon Mack, in my opinion, would be a good compliment, you know, to Miles Sanders coming off an Achilles injury, you know, on a prove-it deal. You got Malik Hooker that could step in at safety next year and start right away. Another guy, 24 years old, coming off of, you know, an Achilles injury. Linebacker Anthony Walker, not the most athletic of linebackers, but 25 years old and a straight-on tackling machine. And then you got, you know, 3 offensive linemen, you know, from the Chargers that's up. So you have the ability to improve the football team. You know, it's all about, you know, can they clear the cap space? Can they do enough with the current circumstance that they find themselves in, you know, to make the defense a little bit better? Or is the intent to continue to spend money and spend draft picks, you know, on offensive players in order to placate and satisfy Carson Wentz?
But the problem is they also invest so much money in picks and they don't hit on them. That's the thing that mystifies me about Howie Roseman and the spell he's got over Jeffrey Lurie. Is like, tell me the guys he can't hit on many of them, right? And then they keep bringing back Jason Peters, right? And like, he was all-time great player for the Eagles. Not so much anymore, right? I mean, go down the list of some, Alshon Jeffrey. And I know it's a contract thing now, like they're just kind of stuck with him, but my God, he's worthless. They keep bringing back Deshaun Jackson. You know what Deshaun Jackson does? He gets hurt. Like, well,
he just retired now. They're not bringing back Alshon.
Did Deshaun retire?
Yeah, he retired. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Retired. Yeah, he retired. There's no way that they're going to bring back Jason Peters. I think Jordan Mailata's kind of taken that position and ran with it. I don't know what the hell they're going to do with Dillard, you know, their first round pick from 2 years ago. You know, he's all but, you know, and it's funny because I've never seen a guy more happy to be put on IR than I saw when Dillard was put on IR. I mean, he was doing flips, you know, because he didn't have to play. Jordan played well enough that he's now established himself as a guy that can play at that left tackle position. You look on the defensive side of the ball, Nathan Gary will still be there. That's that. We all knew Singleton. You know, we screened for Singleton for 2 years. They gave him an opportunity. He was a tackling machine. But can they bring in another guy, another impact linebacker to make a difference? I played against the likes of looking across the field and seeing a Seth Joyner, seeing a Ray Lewis, seeing a Junior Seau, seeing a Hardy Nickerson. When you see players like that, you know you have to get off this double team and get to that player. They don't have guys like that create an urgency for an opposing offense. And that's the problem. They need to find and invest in a guy that can come in and be a demon day one. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you draft somebody with the intent of coming in with a nasty disposition. They won't do it at a high level at the linebacker position. It's just not going to happen.
I will say this, okay? And Barrett, I hear what you're saying. Josh, I get what you're saying as far as, how they've drafted and how they've missed, okay? Could Howie have done a better job drafting? Absolutely. But I also believe that, and this is where I hope that what the Eagles are about to bring in puts them in position, to better their players. Where's the player development? You can listen. The Eagles could have drafted DK Metcalf. The Eagles could have drafted, Terry McLaurin. They could have drafted Justin Jefferson. But does that ensure that those guys would have came to the Eagles and performed the way that they have at their respective teams? Absolutely not. Because we haven't shown the propensity to be able to develop the players that we draft. I mean, look at all the guys that leave and go elsewhere and have halfway decent careers that can't even get on the field here. Rasul Douglas, Nelson Aguilar. The list goes on and on. Eric Rose played in 2 Super Bowls with the Patriots, I mean, the list just goes on and on about
and
guys.
How are these guys still here? How do we justify the existence of Howie Roseman? Because everything you're saying is true, and everything Barrett has said is true, and everything I have said is true. Yet somehow there's one common denominator because you fired 2 coaches, you hired another one. So you fired 3 because you got rid of Andy, you got rid of Chip. You got rid of Doug Peterson now. This is your 4th head coach since 2012 right now. And everything you say is right. Where's the player development? Where's the drafting? There's one person who builds all of this, and his name is Howie, and he's still here. And if they're not going to get rid of him now, they may never get rid of him. You know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like he is the issue. I don't even know if it's debatable that he's the issue, because who builds the player development staff? I mean, I know that's not a staff, but you get my point, that who builds the coaching staff? Well, the general manager's building the coaching staff. Who hires all of these people that are supposed to be so brilliant that advance the careers of these guys? It's the GM, and he doesn't do it. That's the issue.
And there's so many players to leave here. Look at Poyer, starting safety for the past couple of years for that Bills team. Established himself as a great safety back there. Mozart, people don't understand, he was a running back here. He started his career here for the 49ers. He started here. And what is he doing in San Fran right now? I mean, those are the misses that we let go and they weren't developed with this coaching staff that we had here. So, I mean, you're right about that. If we can't develop the talent that we have, with the exception of the offensive line position and the running back position, with Deuce, I don't see where we have guys that are really, taking a step in the right direction during their coaching period here. Offensive line, they bring guys in, and somehow, that coach makes it work. I don't know how Stoutland does it, but he makes it work. He made a player in Jordan Mailata that never touched the football field, but made him into a player. He's developed guys into some really good players. He had Jason Kelce. Jason Kelce was 200 nothing pounds and made him into an all-pro type of caliber type of center. But other than that, where else do I see that type of development, in that locker room? You're absolutely right. We need coaching. It has to be a definite step in the right direction now, especially with these young guys.
Well, listen, the coaching is part of it. To your point, Josh, I believe that Howie is Jeffrey's blind spot. I think, he really loves the guy to the point where, or Howie's just a master manipulator. It's one or the other, or Jeffrey isn't as engaged in the day-to-day operations of the team, and he's putting that on Howie's plate, and whatever Howie tells him, whatever Howie gives him, that's what he believes. But I know one thing, I sat and I listened to Jeffrey's entire press conference the day after he fired Doug Peterson, okay? And I was just astounded because the Philadelphia media, those guys did a phenomenal job posing the question, if you're going to hold your head coach and your defensive coordinator and your offensive coordinator, accountable, why not your GM? And, question upon question upon question, the thing that Jeffrey Lurie did is he defended him. He kind of pushed it off. He was like, well, no one here is making one decision, over the other. It's a group deal. Listen, I know for a fact that Howie Roseman made the decision, disregarding, the predominant feeling, the predominant recommendation for Justin Jefferson. He overrode that and made the decision to draft Jalen Reagor. Okay, it wasn't Doug Peterson. It wasn't anybody else. It was his call. But if Jeffrey's going to continue to defend Howie and his transgressions and how he established the rosters and how he signs free agents and how he drafts for this organization, then guess what? The organizations are going to continue to be in tumult and in chaos. And listen, the Philadelphia Eagle fans, the Eagles organization are going to be in for a painful transition and a painful restructuring. Hey, listen, for the last 10 minutes, guys, let's jump over and let's talk about the Super Bowl. So you got, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pull off the upset, in the entire playoff deal, going into Lambeau and beating Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers 31-26. Briefly, tell me what did each one of you guys see? What did you learn about the NFC champ Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Barrett?
I saw it in the beginning of the year when not the beginning, it was midway through the year where I saw that Tampa Bay team whoop the Green Bay Packers at home. In Tampa Bay. They put it on them. And what happened was, offensively, they generated pressure on that offensive line in which, they couldn't block JPP. They couldn't block Shaq Barrett. And since they didn't have their starting tackle out there, JPP had the game of his life. He was unblockable. At no point during the game was A-Rod comfortable in passing the ball back there. They consistently put pressure on him. And I was telling people last week, I said, if the Green Bay Packers win, they're going to go in, they're going to play the Chiefs. So I knew the Chiefs were going to win. And when they play the Chiefs, they will lose to the Chiefs. But if Tom Brady gets that offense going and that defense keeps playing the way it's playing, they could possibly stay step for step with that Chiefs team. And they have the ability on defense to generate pressure. They have guys that could run with Kelsey at the linebacker position, with White and David. They have, their safeties. If they get both their safeties back, they can compete, man, up front. They play aggressive. We know Todd Bowles is a guy that's going to make sure they get tight on those guys. And they're not going to make a mistake and not double team at least Kelsey or at least Hill. One of the two will be doubled, not both of them. They will just double the two of them. But one guy will not, have a game where he just breaks out. They're going to keep one of those guys in check. And that's how you beat this Kansas City Chiefs team. You got to keep at least one of those guys in check.
Josh,
let me say this. As a bitter Saints fan, the Saints should have beaten Tampa, and they shouldn't even be here. If Jared Cook doesn't fumble, they go in and score. They're up 14, and they probably win that game. Let's not act like Tom Brady's been a god. Not that you did, but Tom Brady threw 3 picks.
No, I was like that defense.
It's all defense, and they've got good playmakers. And, of course, Green Bay, and I think was it Carter? Who am I thinking of? Chris Carter, I think, said this today. At halftime, when the little white guy scored, he scored because they ignored him because he's a little white guy. They're like, he ain't going deep with 8 seconds. Dude just burns him, and he's wide open. And Chris Carter goes, he scored because they didn't respect the white dude. They didn't sag. If that were Antonio Brown, they would have sagged and would have said, hey, you ain't beating us deep. Little white dude beat him deep, and it set the course for the rest of the game. But Tom shouldn't even been there anyway because he's thrown, I think, like 4 or 5 picks in these 2 playoff games. And and their offense hasn't been spectacular. And I am a bitter Saints fan on that. If the Saints don't fumble, maybe they win. Maybe they don't beat Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and then maybe Aaron Rodgers is there. But I'm going with the Chiefs. The Chiefs are going to beat them. The Chiefs are a better football team. I think they have a better coach. And I like Bruce Arians, but let's be real about Bruce Arians, too. And I like him, right? First of all, what the hell's he doing with like his thing across his chest? He looks disheveled. Remember how cool Bruce Arians used to look like on Hard Knocks when he's got the cabbie hat and he's tan and he's got the glasses and everybody's like, this is the coolest white dude ever. And now he looks homeless. He's got like long Jerry curl going in the back and he's got a mask on and he's got his little button for his microphone, but it's instead of his waist, it's across his chest. And I like Bruce a lot, but I think he got better coach, better play caller, better overall team. I mean, Mahomes is a monster. I mean, right?
Yeah,
like, there's no other way to put it. The dude's spectacular, and they're going to get another one. But if
they got two
close,
offensive linemen out now. Now Fisher is out for the season. He blew his Achilles, and then the other tackle's out also.
Well, I tell you what. Let's go conference by conference. You know, and you guys can say whatever you want to say about Tom Brady. In that first half, Tom Brady looked like Father Time had nothing on him.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep.
I mean, he played about as perfect a game as you could play in the first half of that game, and the minus plays were the 3 drops, the 2 in the flat by Fournette, and that big ball that was dropped by 14, the wide receiver. I forget his name. Godwin.
And that's Brady's dude. And Godwin's his security blanket. That's his dude.
Now, in the second half, not so much. And I attribute that to, Tampa Bay got greedy. The one thing that I think that undoes Bruce Arians is his no risk it, no biscuit philosophy, okay? Yep. Because you're up in the game, and instead of running the ball, because that's what got you to where it got you to in the first half, the running game and the play action pass for Tom Brady, got them the lead in the first half of that game. They come out of halftime, they're trying to be overly aggressive, and every one of those balls that Tom Brady had to throw, he was under duress because they didn't come out and reestablish the running game in the beginning of the second half. Now, if they don't get greedy, okay, and you go possession by possession, they can score with Kansas City. Yep. And as we go over to Kansas City, let's look at them, okay? Yeah, they destroyed and dismantled a Buffalo team that looked like they were trending up. The most astonishing thing to me is Andy Reid and Bieniemy and Mahomes. Listen, they're so innovative, man. When you look at their offense, they look like they got 4 different offenses roll up into one. And what Buffalo looked like they prepared for the previous 2 weeks offensive plays, and Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy and Mahomes came out with a whole nother plan. You didn't see the deep crossing routes this week. You saw vertical routes with Travis Kelce getting into, and I'm like, come on, man, get up and beat the dude up at the line of scrimmage. But the question is, one of my questions was, what did we learn about the Kansas City Chiefs that we didn't already know? And to me, the biggest point is not so much offensively, because we know what they are offensively. Their Achilles heel to me is their defense, and their defense showed up big time, last week in a way that they hadn't really shown up all season long.
Sean Jones, unblockable in the interior. Where did he come from? He had been gone for like the last 3 games. He showed up so big in his last game. They couldn't do anything up the middle. They couldn't stop anybody. And then they were blitzing like crazy. How many times did you see the honey badger and, coming off the edge, that they hadn't did that weeks before, but they dialed up the blitz against this young kid and he couldn't handle it. He didn't know what to do, man. He couldn't get away to drop back and have 20-yard sacks twice during the game. It just goes to show that they were ready to make sure they put as much pressure on him as they could, knowing that he would want to make the big play and going to his big play receiver. But they stopped all that with the blitz package.
Well, I think also, and I think there's an element of not being ready for prime time or it not being your time yet. And like Michael had to beat in the Pistons, you have to get through the Pistons to get here, or you know how that goes historically. You got to finally get there. I mean, that's a big moment for Buffalo. They hadn't been in that situation, and there's a lot of pressure on them, and the city's going nuts, and they hadn't been there since 94. So it just didn't feel like a good spot for them to win that game. Kansas City's primed. They've been to the playoffs, I think, every year under Andy Reid. They're coming off a Super Bowl. They're at home. They've done it before.
They were never comfortable.
No, absolutely not. And maybe next year, if that game happens again, I would say Buffalo's got a much better shot. I think getting there and doing it helps. So I wasn't shocked there, but I didn't really learn anything new about Kansas City. I mean, yeah, they had a good defensive game, but they are who they are. I mean, their defense is going to have holes. Let us not forget that Kansas City was dismantling Tampa earlier in the year, and then Tampa in junk time, I think they covered the 6-point spread in that game as a gambler. Yep. These are the ways I view things. They were up huge, and then bang, 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 couple plays, they're right back in, and in junk time. So I didn't learn anything new, though, about Kansas City. Mahomes is a beast. Andy Reid is a monster, and they've got playmakers everywhere, and it's really despicable how much they have there. It's unfair how much they have there. Yeah, but then again, Tom Brady's loaded with talent too. Like, I mean, they just went out to the halfway house, and they're like, all right, Antonio Brown, you're in. You're and Leonard Fournette, you fell apart, and we're a bust in Jacksonville. Come on, we'll get 50 yards out of you a game. Like, that's just what they do.
And Gronk comes from out of nowhere. Oh, I'm going to play now that he's left New England.
The dude was wrestling. He was in the WWE. And then he's like, well, Tom's back, so I guess I'll go for a couple more rides. He ain't going to retire anytime soon as long as Tom plays. So it's a halfway house there, but they're loaded with talent. So, I mean, a fun Super Bowl matchup, I mean, just based on offensive talent. But I agree with you. I think the defense of Tampa is better. It's just this. Hopefully, here's what I hope for. This is one of these games that's like 45-43. It's just a shootout. Like a couple years ago when Tom was in there, it was 13-3 against the Rams. I want to see just tons of scoring and have it come down to Tom or Mahomes with the ball with one last shot to win it, and let's go.
You know what my take is? You remember back in the day when Brady and Peyton Manning used to battle? The Patriots offense, transformed itself because it had to, because with the rule changes and Peyton Manning, with the spread offense, and they were scoring almost every possession. You remember the New England Patriots offense was basically a 2-3 tight end offense. They were a running offense, and then they went play action pass with Gronk and Hernandez and so on and so forth. They had to evolve in order to keep up, with the Indianapolis Colts and Peyton Manning. I see this as a similar type of matchup because both of these offenses have the ability to score every single possession.
Yep.
And listen, as great a job as the Chiefs defense did last week, you're not going to stand up there and show Tom Brady pre-snap blitzes and think you're going to get away with it. I promise you. Yep. I promise you Spagnuolo is not going to do that. But I can see this game going down to the wire. To your point, Josh, whoever has the ball last, Brady or Mahomes, is probably going to win this game. So one final question, can Tampa Bay win this game? Can the Chiefs be beat any given Sunday?
Well, they
I'm
can.
Going with Tampa Bay.
Oh,
I'm on the Tampa Bay bandwagon simply because Bruce Arians is my guy, man. He had more soul than me. He's my guy, and I just think that defense is the X factor in this game. Both offenses can score, but that defense with Shaq Barrett and JPP coming off the edge and those two linebackers that could cover in the middle of that field will be a decided advantage for that Tampa Bay team. Plus, they're at home. They're playing at home.
In front of a bunch of rich people that get tickets. Those aren't even real fans. Might as well be cardboard cutouts. Those aren't even human.
Josh, before I let you answer, I will say this. The thing that worries me the most about Tampa Bay's defense is their corners. Their corners are susceptible to the big play. They're susceptible to speed. They play afraid, when they play against really, really, great speed because they're young. They're young. And if you don't get there, I mean, I can see Andy Reid when he wants to take shots down the field. I can see him going match protect Barrett, keep the tight end in, keep the back end. You got 7 guys in to protect, to take care of 4 guys, and you drop back in a zone, or you got man coverage and those other guys aren't releasing. You got one-on-one down the field with 3 speed receivers and a single high safety, and the way that Mahomes manipulates, safeties with his eyes and comes back the other way. That to me is a big deal. Josh, you get the last word.
I will say that no matter what they do, you've got a quarterback who's like Meadowlark Lemon. He can throw it behind his back and through his legs, and you hear Sweet Georgia Brown when the dude plays. You can do whatever you want. I don't believe he's going to be stopped, so I would still go with Kansas City. You know where Bruce Arians' first head coaching job was?
Temple's finest, right?
Temple. He had a hell of a curl too. If you go back and look at pictures of that dude, he looked like he kind of looked NWA. He looked a little cute. a little cute. Like, he had the curl going. Like, it's an impressive curl. But I love Bruce, but Bruce is gonna. I listen. Andy's the master right now in terms of play calling. He's unreal. He's got the best quarterback in the game. The dude is like there's no way you don't stop him, right? Like, you think you've got him. I was watching the Saints and the Chiefs, and the Saints have a really good defense. And I'm watching the Saints and the Chiefs a couple weeks ago, and you think you got the guy. It's like, it's 3rd and 17. That's nothing. That's dropping a bucket. Like, I like Tom's the legend. He's the GOAT. There will never be anybody that wins as many Super Bowls, and there will never be anybody who plays in as many Super Bowls as Tom Brady. But I'm going with Mahomes. Mahomes is going to win it.
He's a $500 million man, not a million, but a $500 million man. So I understand it also.
I tell you one other thing. I love Todd Bowles' mentality when it comes to defense as well. He can get aggressive and he can scheme you up. You know, listen, it's going to be a great game. I can't wait to see it. And, you know, Josh, you talk about those cutouts. You know, the NFL has mandated that they're going to have about 22,000 people at that game. And you can rest assured that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to try to figure out a way to get as many Buccaneers fans up in that game.
Well, best of luck. It costs $22,000 a ticket. So that's like and now they're putting in some healthcare workers, some people too,
Absolutely.
like 7,000 of those. The rest of them are going to be people who are with Coke and with Pepsi and with GMC. It's going to be a bunch of rich people that don't get loud. So there's no home field advantage in this game. It does suck that the first home field advantage Super Bowl is going to be half or a third full. That sucks.
Hey, listen, I guarantee you the Tampa Bay is going to figure out a way to get some Bucs fans up in there. As many as they can. They'll figure it all out. Hey, listen, guys, I appreciate you guys today, man. This show has been awesome. I'm looking at the comments, you know, from my viewers. They enjoyed it today. I always enjoy talking football with you guys. Hey, listen, I tell my guests every week that, you know, our time is our most valuable commodity, and I thank you guys for spending the last 66 minutes with me here on the Seth Joyner Show. Thank you much. Enjoy the Super Bowl in 2 weeks, and you know, always great to have you.
I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it, guys. That's our show for today. As always, be good to each other, take care of each other, but most importantly, love each other. I'll see you guys right back here next week with another Super Bowl preview. Peace out and love.